Getting feedback on your screenplay is a vital part of the development process. However, getting it at the wrong time can be damaging and counterproductive, not to mention being expensive. So in this video, we're going to set out how to use milestones to make you more efficient. So if you're after script or story advice, which you should be, then script readers and consultants are an obvious choice. What you actually need, however, greatly depends on where you are in the writing process. So in this episode, we're going to talk about using a stepped milestone approach to get feedback on screenplay. Steps, meaning breaking the screenplay writing process down into distinct steps. And then by milestones, we mean picking certain key points within those steps in order to say this screenplay is as developed as I can possibly make it, and now I'm going to pause and go out and find out what others think of the work. Getting lots of feedback at one of the milestones allows you to be able to check for consistencies, both in what's working well and also what's working not so well. Many writers use milestones, or the principle of milestones, in order to start and develop other projects. It's a great way to separate your mind and think of something new, and then even if it's 2 or 3 weeks or a month, when you've come back to it, you're coming back to it with a fresh pair of eyes. So if you want the worksheets that accompany this series, you can download them for free using the discount code at the end of this video. Just hop along then to clickimagination.com and go to the downloads page. Step 1 is an outline, and that's an inward-facing document that you use to tell the story to yourself. And it's a melting pot where you throw every idea and character and world of the story and a bit of dialogue and whatever you want to do. Just chuck it all in there, and then you kind of flesh that out, and that ultimately becomes the story over time. Step 2 is where you take that and you start to create what's going to be an outward-facing document. So you're going to be telling the story, but doing it a lot more colourfully, more conscious about the prose and the use of description and language. Oh, and a handy little tip for outlines and treatments is use the page numbers to reflect the lengths of the acts. So what I mean is, if you're producing a 4-page treatment, then the first page is Act 1, the next 2 pages are Act 2, and then the 4th page is Act 3. Step 3 is taking the treatment and putting it into a script. So you're going to write your first draft with it, which will then become your second draft, third draft, fourth draft, etc. The next step is in polishing. And that's when you've got everything down, so you have a really solid screenplay in terms of story, and you are getting it ready then to send it out to the industry. So you want to make sure that it's presented perfectly, that all the dialogue is really quick and snappy, all the action is cut right to the bone. Make sure there's no fat in there whatsoever. It's absolutely the very best presented story it can possibly be. One thing that crops up from time to time is when readers get asked to, here's my screenplay, please, it's not finished yet, but just give me some ideas, give me the feedback, am I heading in the right direction, all this kind of ethereal stuff. The danger with that is that, first off, you're going to pay, because you're paying a reader to look at 120 pages. And also, what are you really expecting back? Because a reader is there to give you advice on what you've written, not what you're going to write or really what you haven't written. The story is yours to tell. A reader's role is to try and help you shape that story. If you genuinely feel as if you have reached a brick wall and the story is not finished in the way you want to do it, don't get feedback on a screenplay. Look at it back at the treatment and outline level, and also go and find yourself a writing partner, somebody you can collaborate with and sound ideas off. It will be a lot cheaper in the long run than sending it off to a reader or consultant. Feedback at outlining stage is really best if it's kind of quick and dirty. So peer support works really good. Having a network of people you can ping an email off. What do you think about this as an opening scene? What do you think about this as a character? That's great if you've got a network of people around you who can quickly respond to comments like that. In the outlining stage, it's really great if you can get feedback from peers who really understand you. They know you as a person, they know you as a writer, they know your sense of humour, your foibles, your quirks, because they can really help you then tease all of that voice out of that draft and make sure that you are on the page and you're not getting lost. A development call with a professional reader is also a really good way to get the feedback. So rather than just writing to them, say, look, what's your charge out rate for half an hour, per 30 minutes or an hour? And then when you get that call, structure it. Know the questions you want to ask them. You can either send material first, which you would pay for, of course, and then the half hour or hour call is about discussing what you've sent, or you can just have an agenda and go cold and just ask them and sound them out. Whatever works best for you. But it is about that relationship. You've got to be on the same wavelength. Oh, and ask if you can record the calls as well, because that saves you having to make any notes. You can just play it back at your heart's content. With the hard work done in the outlining and treatments, it's time to get on and write your first draft. It's advisable to date the drafts and also create a file on your computer with the date of that revision, and then you can store the script that you've sent and then all the notes in one place. It makes it really handy later when you come back to reviewing all of those notes together. So when you've sent off that screenplay, there will be an inevitable downtime whilst you are waiting for feedback. During that time, don't be tempted to continue to develop the script or develop the story. Because what you need to do is detach your mind from that project so that when the feedback comes back, you know that it is based on the draft that you sent, not the draft that you are continuing to develop. Because the temptation is with writers, and we all kind of challenge this denial, the real issue with writers is that they will take that feedback and go, yeah, I know, yeah, you're right, it's a valid point, but I've fixed that now. I understood I was wrong there. I realized almost as soon as I sent it off, and I've put that right and I've made that work. Don't be afraid to make the changes from that feedback in a treatment instead of a screenplay. Screenplays are very difficult beasts to edit, and they're also a very big document to edit, whereas treatments, go back to a 12-page treatment or a 4-page treatment if you need to do. Depends how severe those suggestions and those revisions are. Very severe suggestions go way back to the smaller documents and then come back and scale again. Don't try and figure it out with a screenplay. Writers are less precious about editing outlines and treatments than they are about screenplays. I don't know what it is, but something about having a script that means that writers become very protective and precious about that document. So when the structure and the theme and the plot are all nailed, then it's time to get on to the nitty-gritty of making sure that all the formatting and the spelling and the presentation is as perfect as it can be. The other thing to point out is that not all readers proofread. So if you're not very good at spelling, well, even if you are, I would still get it professionally proofread. But make sure you ask the reader, do you proofread? Don't assume that they do. And if they don't, then you need to get somebody who can give it a proofread. And then also just bear in mind that when you get to that final proofread, you must never be tempted to change anything. That final read is like a seal in amber, in resin. You're taking that script, it's been read, you can't touch it anymore, because anything that you so I'll change this and I'll change that, and no, because you can easily introduce a spelling error. And believe it or not, we've all done it, but there's nothing worse than quickly changing something and going, that's brilliant, I'm glad I added that. And then you come back later and you pick it up and you go, I've spelled it wrong. So take time, think of it by those milestones, and the very last step is getting it proofread by somebody who can spot all the mistakes. So still to come in this series, we have episodes on what you should be paying, how you find these readers, episodes on scoring screenplays and script coverage, and then we have also an episode on how you actually work with all this feedback as well. So even though in this episode we've just lightly touched on milestones and going out to readers, we've got a full episode on how you work with the feedback that you get. So please subscribe and do the little bell thing, because there's lots of more exciting things to come. So after a couple of really solid redrafts, you would be advised to get some market advice, to get an idea of how the market would receive your screenplay, the marketability, if you like, of your screenplay, as we covered in a previous episode. What if that came across a producer's desk? What would they think about it? And then when you get that advice back, and I would suggest you also get a log line back from them as well, because they are brilliant. Execs are brilliant at producing log lines, far better than the writers. I know it's horrible to hear, but it happens to be the truth. And what's interesting is when you get their feedback and the commercial feedback, they will perhaps see your screenplay slightly different to you, and that might change the tone more. So you might decide that actually they see it more as a thriller than maybe a drama or a comedy, so you can do your revisions based on what they think the market would be more suited to, without really changing the essence of the story. Of course, this is all subjective. It depends whether you want to go in that direction, but at least you know honestly what a market view is and what the potential is of your screenplay when it's ultimately faced with an exec and it's going through a coverage process. So just one point in relation to what I term the silent script killer, and that is budget. And it's a great question to ask when you go out to the market for that feedback, is to get an idea of whether they think your budget, based on what they read, is in line with others in the genre, and whether it's sustainable. Because it's not uncommon for somebody to read a script and go, that is just far too expensive. And in all of the other feedback, that's not going to get highlighted. So you're not going to spot it through a script reader and an editor, and you're not necessarily going to find out that's the reason if all you get is a straightforward rejection. If you want the worksheets that accompany this series, then head over to clickimagination.com and visit the downloads page and use this discount code here to get the downloads for free. Getting professional reader feedback on your work is essential, but it can also be expensive. So in the next episode, we're going to explore how you get the best value for money.